Welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory. This Christmas night, a special program just for you. Raymond Moody with us this hour. Raymond, of course, an expert on near-death experiences, as well as a lecturer on subjects as cult activities, interconnections between humor, health, and, of course, a very specialized expert in near-death experiences. His website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Raymond, Merry Christmas, my friend. How are you?
Merry Christmas, George. It's always good to be with you. Thank you so much.
It sure is. You know, this is a special time for a lot of people who have lost their loved ones. And, you know, they have this special feeling. Is this different? I mean, does the other side understand that?
You know, George, I'm not sure about that, but I do know this, that it is, you know, although I was a forensic psychiatrist, at this point in my life, most of what I do clinically is I help people who are going through grief over loss of a loved one. And so, yes, generally speaking, the holidays are a tough time for people who are grieving. And the reason, especially the first holiday after somebody has died. And so I always try to sort of, you know, acknowledge this and say amidst all the fun, I mean, my kids and I and my wife were just having such a great time this morning, you know, and that sort of brought to my mind that there are many people who are, you know, the holidays reminds them of the loss they've had during the preceding year. So often this is a tough time for people who are grieving. And at the same time, George, you know, you and I have known each other for a long time, and
yes,
you know that this idea of an afterlife has always been kind of counterintuitive to me. I you know, was a holdout in terms of saying that these near-death experiences are a proof of an afterlife. But I am really confident, George, that 2014 is going to be the year where we have a genuine rational breakthrough in the study of the afterlife. I am really confident on that. And
why do you feel that way, Raymond?
Well, because basically, let me tell you something really interesting that happened in my life. You know, I was a philosophy professor with a PhD in philosophy before I went to medical school, with my special areas of interest being logic and ancient Greek philosophy. Then I went to medical school, became a psychiatrist, and did forensic psychiatry even before it was popular. So anyway, some years back, in connection with that, I came across a case of a really horrific murder, the kind of thing that gets, you mentioned, you know, your grandchild. I have a wonderful daughter, you know, and so even as a forensic psychiatrist, when you hear about these terrible things, it really touches your heart, and it makes you worried about your own family and so on. So anyway, I heard about this murder that took place down in Tampa of a young woman, 26 years old, named Katie Freshley. It was just like a particularly horrific and utterly senseless random murder. And so that, for some reason, this case really sort of got to me. And then, a few years later, George, this man came here to my place and wanted to go through the psychomanteon procedure, which is something you and I know about. But basically, as you know, I developed this method.
It's with a mirror system, right?
Yeah, basically, it's a method of taking people through a procedure during which many of them say they see and converse with their departed relatives. But anyway, by this weird chance, this guy Jeff Freshley, a very well-known attorney in Tampa, came, and he was impressed by this procedure we went through. Anyway, so I was just mentioning to Jeff this new system of thinking that I've developed as a logic professor over many years, and so Jeff got interested in this. And then, to make a long story short, he has a foundation for his daughter Katie, and so a couple of years ago he agreed that he asked me to come down to Florida to put this on. Actually, it's coming up in January 17th and 18th in Orlando, this presentation. But in the meantime, George, I came across a case of involving a near-death experience that has blown my mind, and let me run this by you, okay?
All right.
This, to me, cinches it. 3 years ago, I was out west. I met a really nice man who's a graphic artist who had this horrific car crash during which he had an extended cardiac arrest and an amazing near-death experience. In the car crash, his wife was killed instantly, and this guy lost both his legs. But having this amazing experience, which changed his life, he bounced back beautifully. You can't even tell he walks on prosthetics. And so maybe 2-3 years ago, I was out west, and he came up to me after my lecture on near-death experiences and said, as I often people hear, he said, well, I had this experience, and he told me about it. And I encouraged him to write this up, thinking that's how artists process things, So anyway, to finish this up, in August of 2012, he sent me his finished book, which is really a terrific little book. And then, less than 2 weeks later, he called me back, and he said that in reading his own book, he realized he had mentioned the name of and I should emphasize, eminent and renowned trauma surgeon who saved his life. So and as typically of patients in this situation, he didn't talk to his doctor about it. Most patients will not mention their near-death experiences to their physicians for obvious reasons. Okay, so he called me back, and he said, in seeing that he had mentioned the name of the doctor, he thought, well, what if by any chance this doctor were to see his own name in this book, and the artist just thought, well, this would be kind of impolite. So he called the doctor and invited him to lunch, and when the doctor came, he talked to him and told him his near-death experience. So then he said the doctor became very solemn and silent and said, well, I've never told anybody this, but that night you came into the hospital, I knew you weren't going to die because the operating room opened out into another dimension, and I talked with your wife, who had been killed in the accident.
Died. That's amazing. The doctor's saying that. Wow.
Yeah. Now, George, at that point I threw up my hands, because theoretically you can think of, some sort of way out of this, right? At the same time the patient was having a near-death experience due to the cutoff of the oxygen flow to the brain. The eminent and renowned trauma surgeon was what? Having an hysterical episode. I mean, at a certain point, it just gets implausible.
Who would have predicted that? Raymond, we're going to come back with you in a moment. We'll take some phone calls and keep talking about the afterlife during the holiday season on Coast to Coast AM.
We're happy tonight, walking in a winter wonderland.